The budget shows the Prime Minister doesn't know how tough it out there is on Main Street. The Liberals' growing deficit of trust, another headline read. Another one, after all the hype, the Prime Minister's first budget fails to meet the moment. Once again, the Prime Minister doesn't live up to the hype, was another one. Followed by, when the big day came, it wasn't quite as advertised. Reuters writes, the Prime Minister's budget falls short on vow to transform the Canadian economy, and perhaps the most devastating from Mr. Don Drummond, who was in the Chrétien-era finance department. He co-wrote a generational budget that does little but set federal spending adrift. Mr. Chair, that basically sums up the response to the budget. But if you're wondering how the last 10 years go, you only actually have to look at the budget itself. The government writes in its own budget on page 53, if Canada's productivity growth had matched the U.S. from 2017 to 2023, the median income of a family with one child would be nearly $11,000 higher. That is in the government's own publication, an absolute damning account of how it has been under this Liberal government. I am shocked that that made it to print. I'm shocked that that made it to print, that they would admit how badly it has been going for this government. Now, the last 10 years have been difficult. We're trying to get over the hangover of Prime Minister Trudeau. And this budget actually does a number of reversals, or completes a number of reversals of the former Prime Minister Trudeau's legacy. The digital services tax is gone, the luxury tax is gone, the underused housing tax is gone, the capital gains tax is gone. They have flipped completely on stable coins and Bitcoin in this budget. Before, they made that a political football and put us behind the 8 ball when the leader of the official opposition said that Canada should be a fintech capital of the world. This government made it a political issue. This government made it a political issue and instead set back fintech innovation in this country. Now they're saying they want to be part of the fintech revolution. They're now saying they might get rid of the emissions cap. And of course, now they cancel what they're calling the divisive carbon tax. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, but you can't get a medal just for reversing the damage that you've done. And all this talk about economic activity in the budget that's going to happen is just, it might not even occur. I mean, if you think about the super deduction, what they're hanging their hat on, the super deduction is only about a couple $100 million a year of additional stimulus than what was already there. They should have adopted the conservative idea, which was to provide capital gains relief for Canadians or Canadian businesses when they sell an asset if they reinvested those assets in Canada. Even the government's very overhyped GST cut for first-time home buyers is only going to help a couple thousand of home purchasers a year. They could have adopted the conservative idea, which was to cut the GST off of all homes that are built in the year. That would help a far greater number of people and promote home building in this country. Remember, the government said that it was going to get a lot of productive investments from SDTC and in the green energy revolution. They said we would see more productivity from electric vehicles or vaccine production facilities or ventilators that never ended up being even built. The Prime Minister ends up having and is setting himself up to have a serious credibility problem, Mr. Chair. He supported the carbon tax all along the way and even disagreed with Prime Minister Trudeau when they took the carbon tax off of Atlantic Canadians, off of home heating in Atlantic Canada. But it didn't matter anyway. He ended up canceling the carbon tax just a few months later. And then he called it divisive and making life more affordable, when before the narrative about the carbon tax was that we were actually all better off for having the carbon tax at the end of the month. The Prime Minister wrote a book on climate change and saying that every decision in government had to be viewed through the climate prism. Now, he doesn't really seem to talk about that very much. During the campaign, the Prime Minister said that China represented the greatest security threat to Canada, and now he says that China represents a new opportunity for Canada. So which one is it? Is China a security threat, or are they there for integration? The Prime Minister is showing himself, that you cannot simply trust what he says. But the proof will be in the pudding. One of my favorite high school teachers, a wonderful man named Mr. Sircone, he said, it doesn't matter how much you make, it matters how much you spend. The bottom line is that you can be wealthy if you watch your expenditures. But the results of this fiscal plan are absolutely devastating for future generations. We used to spend about 6 cents of every dollar on interest on the national debt. That is, paying interest payments on the national debt. That is now projected to more than double to 13 cents of every dollar. That is going to be about $76 billion of money going to bondholders and bankers instead of paying for social services. Even the IMF, that this government loves to trot out because they love multilateral institutions, even the IMF says the amount of money that a government spends on interest on the debt has a corresponding decline in the amount of money that is spent on social services. The government also is borrowing record amounts of money in the bond markets each year. Why does that matter? Well, that matters for two reasons. One, they always borrow on the short term, which means they have to roll this debt over year after year. It means the government is very sensitive to interest rate increases. And the Bank of Canada has warned now that 40% of the purchasers of government debt are actually hedge funds. And these hedge funds rely on buying and selling major government debts from all over the world and trading them immediately. If that system does not continue to work as it's working, we will see yields spike in Canada. That means higher interest rates. Higher interest rates means higher debt service costs. So we're already spending more on servicing the debt than we send to the provinces for healthcare every year. We are spending more on servicing our debt than the government takes in from the GST every year. So the GST that we pay, that Canadians pay every day on every purchase they make, whether it's a car, or you're at a grocery store for some items, or you're buying clothing for some kids, or you're buying basically anything. That amount of money on the GST on every receipt that you see doesn't even cover the interest payments on the national debt. Mr. Chair, it is for these reasons that we cannot support this budget. The finance minister now has a new fiscal anchor, and I'm willing to bet that that fiscal anchor of deficit to the GDP will be broken because he's already close to breaking the fiscal anchor he's just set for himself in this budget just 2 days ago. Thank you, Mr. Chair.